I was already calculating how long it'd be till I could do stuff again. And I'm going, well, if it's just broken, I can be back in 6 weeks. And there was never any doubt in my mind. It ended up being much longer than 6 weeks. In fact, my leg didn't move at all. It had no nerve function for a few months. And so it was just like, well, I'm not really going to be able to climb. But, once I realized that the leg's nerve function was coming back, it was just all out focus on getting back so I could get back to doing what I love.
Today on the podcast, we are extremely excited to have Steph Abegg. Steph had her first international backpacking experience when she was 3 months old on Mount Temple. She got into technical rock climbing in university and has been climbing ever since. She's also a self-professed math and data nerd, which could be why her website is so unbelievably detailed, informative, helpful, and fun. And if you haven't been to stephabegg.com, go on right now, come take a look, and then come back and listen to the podcast because it is amazing. I'm very excited to have you on the show. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I've got a ton of questions, but let's start at the very beginning. Did your parents make you carry a pack at 3 months old when you climbed Mount Temp, or did they spare you from that?
I think they carried me. So if I was carrying a pack, they were also carrying the pack. I think that the main comment they have had over the years about that trip is that I got eaten alive by bugs, but I had a smile on my face the whole time. So this was a good experience.
So right from the get-go, you were outdoors and loving life.
Yep. Yeah.
Your parents met in a very fortuitous way. Do you mind, for the people who don't know how they met and why your first trip was a backpacking trip, do you mind just sharing a little bit of that background?
Sure. So my mom was on a trip with her two sisters in the Olympic Mountains. They were on like a 7-day backpacking trip. And my dad was on a solo 7-day-ish backpacking trip as well. And they just happened to cross paths sometime midday that day and just struck up a conversation, hiked together, and stayed in the same camping area that evening. And then my dad just joined for the rest of the trip. And I think that evening, my mom's sister was like, Sue, you've met your man. And that was it. By the end of that trip, my dad was driving back to Peoria, Illinois to pack up his stuff and move west and get married. So they got married the following year.
Wild. It's also fantastic that he got the stamp of approval from the family the day of.
Yeah, actually, my dad's best friend ended up marrying my mom's sister. So that came on later because my dad's best friend wasn't part of that initial encounter. But yeah, got the stamp of approval. I think that the parents thought it would never last. They're like, yeah, this is crazy. You're not going to meet this gal out west and just get married and have a life together. But they're still happily married.
And then where are they now?
They've been married for 51 years. They're living in Chile,
Wow.
BC, British Columbia, up in Canada. So we moved to Canada back in 1994. So
when you grew up then, were you mainly doing backpacking trips in BC or Washington, or where do you spend your pre-technical climbing years?
So we originally lived in the Midwest. We lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, and then we lived in Winona Lake, Indiana. And we moved out to BC in 1994 when I was 11. So up until then, every summer we'd pack up into the 92 Dodge Caravan and we'd drive west, and we would spend a couple weeks, maybe a month in the West. My mom's family lived in Tacoma, Washington, so we'd stay with Grandpa and Grandma, and we'd go on little forays into the North Cascades. And maybe a couple days, maybe a week. And yeah, that was up until 1994 when we moved to BC. And then it became our backyard, and we were going up into usually the Washington North Cascades all summer, just spending our summers kind of bouncing between trips. And that was kind of like went to university.
Do you know why your parents moved from the Midwest or I guess why were they in the Midwest at first to be?
Right. Well, my dad was from Peoria, but he moved out, and my mom and my dad lived on Vashon Island, Washington, for a decade before I was born. So they were definitely like mountaineers of the Olympics and the North Cascades, Washington stuff. And then my dad began his PhD work, and that's what brought them first to Israel for a few years. And then we moved to Cincinnati and Indiana. He was just doing his PhD and he got his first job as a professor at university there in Indiana. And he had applied to Trinity Western up in British Columbia. And then he just kind of forgot that he had applied, and he figured they'd never get back to him. Been a couple of years, and then all of a sudden he's getting this phone call of, "Hey, you interested? We have this position opening. Are you interested in working here?" And it was just my parents' ticket back out west, and so he took the job. We moved to Canada, moved west, and never left. Or my parents never left. My sister and I both moved back to the States, but fairly close, Washington.
Yeah, just border away.
Yeah.
If there was no borders, it would be stone's throw. So you grew up in a family that like very much valued academics and outdoor. What did your dad teach, and was he also a math major?
No, although
Professor
he's
of
very
math?
good at math. He taught languages, which is kind of mathematical, but his specialty was actually the Dead Sea Scrolls. And we were in Israel for that purpose. He was translating the Dead Sea Scrolls at the time. That was his PhD thesis, and that became his career basically. So he ended up teaching religious studies and various languages at Trinity Western. My mom was also a teacher. She started off as a special ed teacher, and then when we moved to Canada, she took a substitute teaching position because it was nice and flexible, and they treat their subs well there in Canada. So that was her job.
We do
You
that.
do treat your subs well. And my mom was really into the special ed departments too. Like that was normally her specialty, and she'd be called in for long-term jobs and really got to know the kids. She enjoyed her career and only retired a couple of years ago. They worked into their early 70s, but they're both retired now.
Did you, when you were growing up, did you plan to, because you did go into essentially the academics for a period of time, was that always the idea, having two role models in
Yeah,
the teaching
yeah, it
profession?
was what I knew, and also like the idea of researching something cool was always like I was like, oh, I could be like Indiana Jones. I could be a professor, and I could be running around with boulders behind me and find the last crusade. But I was always into math, and so it was just kind of like I'm gonna go and get a PhD in math. I'm gonna maybe teach math. I'm gonna research. I'm gonna discover some cool proof. But that was all very glorified in my head of what it was gonna be like. But yeah, I was in academia for years. I got 3 master's degrees, just loved school. Ended up teaching college calculus at Western Washington in Bellingham, Washington. Taught there for like 6 years
And
and loved that.
at the same time you were doing that, you were also developing your rock climbing skills. And then I remember you telling me a little bit like your students became interested in rock climbing because of you,
Yeah,
and so your worlds started beginning to get merged. Is
yeah,
that
it was
fair?
pretty cool to have students that would they'd be like, "Oh, you're a rock climber!" Like, and they'd be coming into office hours to talk about some hard math problem, and we'd talk about it, and then we'd just go off on some tangent about rock climbing, and a couple of them got into it, and years down the road, they're contacting me again, and they're like really into it, climbing 513. It's just kind of cool to see that passion. I'd like to think I started it, but if climbing's gonna get you, it normally get you. So if it wasn't me, someone else would have showed it to them. But yeah,
Well, now it's
it
everywhere.
was
So
something that I could really discuss with my students and relate with. This really interesting activity that was just apart from math. It's nice to have that.
how did you, because your parents were more mountaineering,
Mhm.
mountaineers, you got into technical rock climbing a little bit later. How did that,
Right. I
is that fair to say? And
Yeah.
how did that
I
happen?
mean, I started off kind of more in the mountaineering phase too. Maybe a little more technical. Like I did like the 5/8-ish stuff and on a big 7-day trip, and that was like a blast. So I think like the Pickett's Traverse, I did the complete Pickett's Traverse in like 2008 or something, where we traversed the entire northern and southern Pickett Range and climbed the North Buttress of Terror and North Buttress of Fury along the way. And that was pretty wild, pretty cool. A lot of glacier traversing as well. And so I just loved those long adventures where you're out there in the mountains for a week and going through rugged terrain. And that's kind of where I started. And that's where my website kind of focused for a while and a lot on just this Cascade stuff. And it was probably around 2010 or so where I had a climbing accident and that kind of inspired me to start to think, well, maybe steeper, harder rock climbing might be a little safer than this 5'8" stuff. And that was kind of the turning point for me of where I kind of upped my game with rock climbing and haven't done nearly as much long mountaineering trips as I used to.
Can you explain a little bit for people who may not understand, and a little bit for me too, because it's sort of weird to think about that harder rock climbing routes might be a little bit safer than something that's graded easier per se. Can you explain why that would be?
Right. Well, if it's easier, it's ledgier. There's more terrain to hit. It's usually lower angle. It's usually blockier, and that's for me. My accident occurred when a rock broke loose, and then I hit a ledge. So those things combined. Also, you tend to run it out a bit more if it's easier. Not placing a piece every 3 feet. When I go about a 512 sport climb, I'm clipping a bolt every 4 or 5 feet, and there's just nothing to hit but air if you fall. So it is ironically safer to climb harder usually. I sort of realized that and took it that direction, but sometimes my mind doesn't realize that. My mind's just thinking about the fall. And I'm thinking, well, 5'8", it's easy. I'm not going to fall. Therefore, I'll be safer. If 5'12", I'm going to fall. I might die, But if I think of it logically, it is safer.
So in 2010, you mentioned that you had the accident. What happened? What do you remember from it?
So it was actually my sister's first alpine climb. I was taking her out for an adventure. My parents had kind of been encouraging us to do so, like, Steph, should take Jenny out and show her what this climbing thing's all about. And so we finally did. We targeted a north face of Vesper Peak in the North Cascades, which is a 5'8"-ish climb. And we decided to make it a little bit more interesting by starting at the very bottom of the face rather than cutting in on the ledge midway. And so it was like, the lower north face or the complete north face or something that the route was called. And soon we approached from below. We're halfway up the route, still below like the ledge where most people come in at. And I was leading. I just placed a number one Camelot, was stepping out on this ledge, and all of a sudden the ledge broke loose and I'm falling. And I did not fall far, but I knew instantly that something was very wrong with my foot. Looked down and yeah, it was not in the right orientation. It was and it was flopping around and there was bone and blood and it did not look good. At this point, Jenny was kind of around the corner. Fortunately, the rock did not hit her because of that. And so she hadn't seen it yet. Put it back on. Like I, twisted my foot back on the right place. I'm holding it there. I'm like, Jenny, lower me down. Something's wrong. Yeah, I got hurt. And so she lowers me down the ledge and didn't really let her see it. I didn't really want to see it either. And so we got our ice axe. We splinted it, wrapped the ice axe on with a shirt and crampon straps, and then took a sling and a carabiner, used it as a tourniquet for my leg, just kind of put that on my upper thigh. I mean, we're just kind of making up this stuff as we go along. What do we do? This is what we think we do. And it was bleeding.
The off-label use of all the equipment.
Yep. And it worked. It worked. I always say that you don't need a first aid kit, you just bring tape. But I think we needed a bit more than tape here. But everything we had worked quite well. And elevated in a bush. It was bleeding quite a lot. Like that was my fears, how much blood had been coming out. Turns out I'd severed a couple arteries, which explained the large amount of blood flow. But by doing what we did and by elevating it and by just the natural clotting, it kind of toned down enough, I suppose. And then so we had to make a plan, and there's no way I was moving. So we decided that Jenny was going to take the rope and all the gear and get herself back down to the glacier by rappelling off of trees and blocks and whatever she could find, and get down the glacier and then traverse the ridge and go up the descent route. It's a third-class scramble. And we knew that there was a chance she'd get a cell phone signal from the top because ironically, I had been involved in a climbing accident the previous year when my partner had fallen, and we had rescued him by going to the summit and getting a phone call out. and getting a helicopter in there. And so like there's this whole story in the background, and I'm like, well, that worked that time. Let's see if it'll work this time. And so she gets to the summit, she gets a bar of service. She calls the helicopter team direct because I had them still in my phone. And I was like, Jenny, you got to call these guys. And she's like, we need a short haul. And I think talking to them after the fact, they're like, a little bit surprised that someone's just calling and asking for a short haul because that's kind of a specialized thing. And that's what ended up happening. And the helicopter team kind of mobilized very quickly. They were already going out to some other, I think it was a body recovery actually, and they just kind of detoured. And they came and they got me off the wall. They short hauled me off and landed down, stabilized me, put me in the helicopter, and then flew me to Everett, I believe. I went to the hospital in Everett. And by the time
Wow.
I was out of it, and I didn't know what was going on, but I woke up the next morning and I was in the hospital with my leg all bandaged up. So it was very touch and go all night. I think it was very unlikely they were going to be able to save the leg at that point because I'd lost so much blood. It had been tourniqueted for so long. There was a lot of damage. And they called in a vascular surgeon who lived a couple hours away, and he drove up and decided to try to repair the arteries, and it was successful. So that was a very lucky, fortunate thing.
Yeah, there was a lot of like for how incredibly unlucky and scary and horrible the entire accident was.
Yeah, it was
Sort of,
unlucky to have happened, but there were so many things that went right.
yeah, right? Because I know for somebody's first time going alpine climbing, they might not know. If I was in that situation, I don't know if I would know exactly where to go, who to call, and be prepared. I would sort of hope that the person who's more experienced would have all that.
Right.
But you were cognizant enough to be like, do this, go there, call, because
Yeah.
you had been in that experience
Yeah,
before, which
I've been
is,
in the same, very similar experience the year before, which kind of just gave me a game plan. Also, you just kick in and it's just like, this is what needs to be done. Jenny's the same way as well. She just kind of gets it and she did exactly what she needed to do. And Jenny has taken off and become quite a climber as well. So this was all in her nature as well. Not surprised at all that she pulled it off like an expert.
you both took this experience, which could be like the death knell of climbing
Sure.
for 99% of the people. And you each have carved out unbelievable climbing careers out of this.
Way, yeah, in a way.
So,
Yeah. I mean, for Jenny, it gave, I don't know, it gave her this boost of confidence that, yeah, I have it. I can, I can do this. And yeah, she's taken off and become quite a climber and done a lot of cool solo things. And for me, it was, I think, the turning point in mountaineering versus more technical stuff. And also, I think during that time, I kind of poured myself into a trip report, this recovery trip report that I did during this. It ended up being a 2 year long recovery to get back to climbing full time. And I think that was kind of like what I had. And I really poured myself into that. And that was also kind of a turning point in my website as well, because I got more awareness for it without meaning to, and just more passion for it.
were you always building your recovery to get back to being climbing? Was there any ever
Yeah.
hesitation to say, this is, I'll just find another, I'll just go on hikes
Oh,
from now?
the first thought I had sitting on that, I was already calculating how long it'd be till I could do stuff again. And I'm going, well, if it's just broken, I can be back in 6 weeks. And there was never any doubt in my mind. And I'm being much longer in 6 weeks. In fact, my leg didn't move at all. It had no nerve function for a few months. And so it was just like, well, I'm not really going to be able to climb. But, once I realized that the leg's nerve function was coming back, it was just, all out focus on getting back so I could get back to doing my love.
How did you rehab? When was the first time that you got on to the rock face after the injury? And what was like the mental state of doing the first climb?
Yeah, I think the first time I rock climbed outside was at the Mountaineers Clubhouse in Seattle. They have these like freestanding pillars that I think they got trucked in from Vantage or something. these like basalt columns that they've set up there, and so you like feel like you're climbing real rock. And so we climbed these basalt pillars, some chimney system inside, and that was like my first outdoor rock climb, if that counts. And then I'm not sure like when was my first real rock climb after that. It just kind of started to happen. I did a lot of biking and a lot of kayaking and just a lot of that kind of trips for a while. Boy, I'd have to look back to see exactly when my first real rock climbing adventure was, but I'm saying it was probably around 2 years afterwards. And I just took off from there.
The cool part is you can look back because every single climb that you've done
Yeah,
is recorded.
yeah, because I have such a horrible memory. And yeah, it's all there
How did StephAbegg.com come about? What
by accident.
kept it going?
Yeah. So for my college graduation, I was supposed to go back and then do the official graduation, but I had a couple friends that were already grad students, and so they didn't have this graduation thing, and I was an undergrad. And they invited me to climb Rainier. And it ended up being the same weekend as college graduation. So I decided to climb Rainier. And that was the first trip report on my website. It was after that I started this blog, and I don't know if it was like stephabegg.com or what it was at that point. It's some Google Sites blog. It was free with my email. I shared that with my friends that I did Rainier with, and it was public as well. I shared with my family, and I started to get comments because on those blogs you could get comments, and I got comments from people I didn't know, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. They're asking me questions about this route, and so then I did another. Maybe it was Shucks and Fisher Chimneys, and I put that up too. And I'm getting more comments and questions, and I made a little overlay for that one. I made a little red line on a mountain, and I was like, wow, okay, this is useful, and I can share this with my parents and my friends, and this is just kind of a nice little package of what we did. And that was kind of where it started. I just kept adding to it and eventually remade it into more of a website mode and kind of backfilled some older trip reports eventually. Like my first rock climb being 1994, I put that on there. It's overhanging tower in the Wind Rivers. Yeah, I put that on there because I was like, well, I have my first rock climb. I've tried to make my website a pretty complete list of all the climbs I've ever done. That's where it started, and then just kind of developed from there.
So after you finish a climb, what's the process for documenting it, putting the overlays on?
Yeah.
How do you overlay a climb?
Okay. So I start the climb before I do it. Usually I make an overlay before I do the climb. That's just, I just kind of want to research the route and kind of get as much of that tedious, time consuming stuff done on the front end anyway. And so I'll have a photo that I probably took at some point because I do try to just take photos of routes I want to do. Then I'll put all the annotations on there for the pitch, the belay positions, the pitch grades, where the route I think it is, what the descent beta is. And this is all just really good research for knowing what the route's all about. And then go and do the climb, have a blast, take a bunch of photos. I always take a photo of every pitch. It used to be something where I'd have to remind myself, but now, for a long time now, it's just been such second nature. Just pull out my camera and take a photo of the pitch. And that also offers timestamps. So I know exactly when we started a pitch and finished the pitch. Got some nice time stamps for every climb now. But then I get back and my partner invites me to dinner, and I'm like, nope, gotta go do my trip report. Usually I dive into my RAV4, plug in my computer into my Gold Zero and my Starlink, put it on the roof, and just download photos and start trip reporting away. And I get it done before I go to bed. That's my typical obsessive experience. And so the overlay is usually done but needs to be tweaked. And I do it right away just because all the memories are fresh and the photos and then post them.
Do you find a lot of enjoyment building these
Oh, yeah.
documentations?
Yeah, I can't decide whether I like the climb or the trip report process better, but somehow, like getting back to my car and being in this safe, warm spot with my computer and all these photos from the climb and the experience and the memories, but now I'm safe. It's almost better, but I don't know. You can't really take away from the actual experience too, being outside and sharing that activity with someone else and, just the conversation that goes on during the day. I'm not all about just the trip report and the beta and everything. Like, try to enjoy the day too, and just have this thing going in the background, but it doesn't hopefully doesn't affect the day.
You found an entire system that works really well,
Yeah,
which is
curriculum.
nice.
It helps prevent epicking too, because there's this. Usually, you have a lot of knowledge of what you're going to go out and do. You've done a lot of research, and then there's this desire for completion and doing it correctly as well.
Have people written you afterwards who have used your beta, your overlays to help them plan the routes?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that feel?
Oh, it feels really nice to, it's being enjoyed and used and helpful to other people. Okay, that's kind of my goal. I think I have that teaching mentality in me forever. And I'm no longer a teacher, but this is my way to kind of spread knowledge and share and instruct in some way. Like this is what the route's all about, and this is how to do it. Still got to climb it, so you still got to have the skills and the athleticism and the drive. But the little details might be nice to do.
Yeah, you're not. You can't just look at a nice route up the Grand Tetons and then know how to do it.
Go climb El Cap. There's no
Yeah,
life for the nose. Let's do it.
exactly.
Can't just go the other way. But
You could have every move dialed up, but like you still need to
yep,
and move your feet and
exactly.
hold on to those nothing holes.
And then what if the weather turns on you? Then what do you do? Like, what's Steph do? So there's a lot more that goes into a climb than just the beta.
There's also a lot of projects on your website too. And so you use the website as just like whatever you get interested in and you're like, oh, this is something.
Yeah, for the last few years, it's been purely endeavors and stuff. But I used to really get into these mini little projects, be like, oh, I want to investigate clouds and I want to see all the different kinds of clouds. And so I'd make a page about clouds and I go out and photograph every single different kind of cloud I could find and put that on there with a description. Or you mentioned it earlier, but I did a multilinear regression study on summit names. So like peaks, mountains, or mounts. And I wanted to know if there was some relation of what it was to its prominence and elevation and isolation. So my hypothesis was an isolated high prominence summit like Mount Baker would be called a mount, or Mount Rainier would be called a mount. And a peak would, in my mind, was something that might have lower prominence because it would have poles that were like kind of spiky and maybe low isolation, maybe is why I'm having low prominence. But anyway, it kind of panned out a bit that mountains, mounts, and peaks do have different kind of metrics for elevation and prominence and isolation. So anyway, little projects like that would be thrown into my website on occasion for a decade there or so. And I did start my website off with a large part of it being photography, and I did a lot of bird photography and bug photography and flower photography, be going out there with my macro lens or telephoto lens and just kind of having fun with photography. And I tried to make it as a photographer way back when I was first starting the website. And so there's a part of my website that kind of showcases that. I haven't kept it as current these days, but it's still there.
Well, a lot of your website is photo based.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's such a visual website that makes it easy to follow along what you're doing.
Yeah. Photography is always kind of like the thing that's driven me to document photos.
What camera do you have now?
A phone.
The best camera.
Yeah. So I started off with a DSLR way back in like 2005, I think, or so. Well, actually, let's backtrack. My first camera was a little digital point and shoot that I got from my high school graduation money, and it was an S30, I think, a Canon S30. And like back then, it was like $800 and just amazing, and it had 2 megapixels. And now that camera probably would be viewed as very low end, but that was my first digital camera. And then I got a DSLR a couple years later and started to take that on climbs, but it was huge. I was like climbing with this giant camera around my neck, banging it around, or had it in a little case or a big case. That was pretty huge. It worked out as long as I was climbing 5'8" or lower. But as soon as I started climbing harder, it's like, well, I can't be bringing this DSLR on 5'10" climbs or 5'11". So I started to transition to a point and shoot that I would have in a little pouch either on my chest, and eventually I moved that chest pouch to the side of my harness. So it was like much like placing a piece of gear. I just reached down and grabbed the camera, snap a photo, and then put it back in. Just the same motion as putting a piece of gear in the rock, and got pretty quick at that. And that's really been my method for the last 15 years or so. And I went with Canon for years, just a little Canon point and shoot. I'd probably go through one a year because they had a hard life. They get beat up, bashed against the rock. So I didn't want to spend too much, but you used to be able to get them for like $30 on eBay. But now trying to get a little point and shoot, the prices have gone way up. So looking at a couple hundred. But along with that, the iPhone. Yeah. It's surprising that the camera prices have gone up, at least for ones that are decent. The same ones I could get for $30 10 years ago are now $300. But along with that came the iPhone, and I started to take photos with my iPhone. I was taking my iPhone along anyway because, I had all my beta. I'd have photos of the guidebook. I'd have notes on it. I'd have, cell service. A lot of these places have cell service. It's nice to have. And so I just was taking it anyway, and I was like, well, I'll just start taking photos with my iPhones. It's a kind of expensive camera, but it's also coming with me anyway. So I have a case for it. I have a tether on it, and that's kind of been my mode for the last few years, is just using the iPhone. And iPhone's photos are pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I was shocked. My friend had a iPhone 17, and I'd never seen it before, and he took a photo of something. I couldn't even see, like, I had no idea what he was even taking a photo of, and then he just zoomed, took the photo and showed it to me, and it looked like it was like 5 feet in front of me. I was baffled.
Yeah.
Completely.
Actually, just yesterday, we were trying to figure out if there were some bolts on a route, and so we took a photo with the iPhone, zoomed in with our fingers, and determined there were some bolts up there. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing what the iPhone can do. I think it's a good tool.
Where are you right now?
I am in Spain.
You mentioned that you climbed a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I'm in Spain. We've been climbing here for 2 months now. My longest sport climbing foray ever, and definitely kind of out of my comfort zone here, sport climbing, because I'm more of an adventure climber, but it's a cool experience, and it's coincided well with my car in the shop too. So, it's just been a good time trying to get stronger for some adventures ahead. And we're here for just a couple more days and then headed back to the States. But yeah, limestone.
And what's the plan when you get back to the States? Are you going to continue your sport climbing or go back to adventure or do a little bit of both?
Maybe I'll see some bolts out there at some point. But my first, I'm going to Red Rocks. It might be a little warm, but it looks like it's cooling down. It's April, so it should be okay. I'm going to Red Rocks for a week or so. And then I have a friend who's flying down to join me in Cochise. There's a couple routes I really want to do for a book I'm putting together. And there's actually a few routes over the country that I've identified I want to do, and one of them happens to be in Cochise. And then after that, climbing with another friend for a couple weeks. Not sure yet where, but probably in California somewhere. Maybe the Valley. Yeah, just kind of lined up a bunch of adventure plans with friends, and I have some goals surrounding some books I'm writing too that are dictating my plans this year.
What's the book that you're writing?
Yeah, I'm writing a book on my favorite climbs. Maybe I'll be able to pare it down to 50. I have a running list right now, and currently quite far along in the project, but there's 7 routes that I've identified that I really want to do, have wanted to do for years, and I think I should do them before I put out this book as I'm working on it. Maybe this one last season, this chance to do the routes I think should be in it. I'll never get done all the routes that are going to be my favorites, but I've been climbing for 20 years or more. Somewhere around there, and I feel like I finally have a pretty good list. Yeah, and it gives me a nice...
At least for volume 1.
This is volume 1, I guess. Or the first, yeah. It's fun.
What's one of the 7 routes that you haven't done that is on your list?
Well, so these aren't guaranteed to be in the book because they might not be my favorites, but I think that they are contenders. So the one in Cochise, Abracadabra. So I've climbed in Cochise a fair bit, and the one route that I've always wanted to do is Abracadabra. It's noted to be one of the better 511 routes there, and it's mostly just a crack climb, a little burly, and it looks awesome. So that's the goal for this coming month. My friend's really into that kind of stuff. He's never been to Cochise, so this is a nice opportunity for him to go to Cochise too. So I'm just trying to make great experiences out of these last 7 because they've all been great experiences, and these will be too. So that's one of them. Other ones, all along the Watchtower. That would be that would be a prize route. And I've also got a friend and climbing partner lined up for that one this summer. So got plans for all of them. It's just, will they happen and will they be good enough or favorite enough to be in the book?
One of the things on your site that I actually found very interesting was you list all your climbing partners, or I presume most of the climbing partners that you've climbed with.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding a good climbing partner? Because you travel around so much, and how do you know they're going to be good before you go out with them the first day?
Oh, it's a good question. It's part of the adventure for me, and I think part of the whole experience is like climbing partners, and a lot of them are friends or people who have become friends and regular partners. So that's the beauty of it. You'll meet someone that you've never climbed with and never met before, and all of a sudden you're climbing again with them, and years later you're still climbing with them. So that's pretty cool. That's actually been a lot of my current regular partners I did meet just on the road. Generally, I line up things with friends, and then I have extra days, or maybe I'll stay there for another couple weeks, and then I just go to Mountain Project, make a little partner post, maybe name some routes that I'm interested in doing, or maybe I'll just look at like people who have made partner posts and listed routes that they are interested in doing and contact them. But it always results in at least one climbing partner, if not 10, and almost always a great experience. You never know what you're going to get, but if you go into it with that mentality, you end up having a great day. I always have had a great day. Yeah, I made a lot of friends. Yeah, a lot of cool people.
That's really great. I haven't done the Mountain Project Fund Partner thing yet, but I also just don't know. I haven't heard that much about like how successful it is or anything like that. So it's good to know that you can find some good partners.
Yeah, I think there are
that way
to creating posts and to weeding through responses, but
yeah. You mentioned earlier that you had a little bit of a fear of falling on some of these harder routes. And then when you go with someone who you've been partnered with for a while, but probably know what fears you have and how to mentally brace yourself for that. But when you go with someone new, do you tell them your mental state, and or how do you frame, what exercises do you do to fortify your mind to be able to climb as effectively as possible?
it depends on the route. Like, so if I'm looking for a partner for, 5, 10 minus or below route, no problem with it. And it's just like, well, I can sleep the whole thing if whatever. If you want to do the route, let's do however you want to do it. If it's something that's more at my limit and maybe even a little run out, I might have a discussion on the route and go like, oh, okay, here's how I'm feeling about, a couple of these like 511R pitches. I don't really feel like I would want to just free them without maybe stick lipping to the bolt if there's a bolt, or are you interested in leaving it? So we have a discussion, or maybe we can climb a different route first and see how it feels. If it's something that's kind of at the mental limit. For me, if it's protectable, I'm good. I can always pull in the cam if my head is messing with me. Yeah. It's the run out stuff, and in general, I try not to target run out climbing. It's just not as fun for me. Now, if a partner's really interested in a run out route, I'm all for it, but I try to make it clear that I'm not really all for leaving anything above 5.9R or something. It's just not my comfort zone.
Yeah. So, and that's something that goes into like the climb and researching it beforehand, knowing exactly what you're going to get into
for sure
before you go.
For sure. And I do a lot of crack climbing, and in general, crack climbing is fairly protectable. So it's just like, well, if you can place a cam, then it's all good.
So we always end these podcasts with 2 book recommendations, one being a guidebook and one being a climbing book. You could do a guidebook for both, you could do 2 climb books, whatever you want to do, but that's sort of the way that we've structured it. Your website is essentially a guidebook, and your new Step 50 Select is going to be a climbing book. So you sort of have it covered yourself, but if you take yourself out of it, what are 2 that you recommend?
I think I've spent the last decade knowing I was eventually going to write a book and a guidebook. I am also working on a guidebook for an area. And so I kind of looked at guidebooks like, what do I like about this? What works really well or what doesn't work well? And I guess one of my favorite guidebooks out there is actually the Squamish Select guidebook. by Mark Burdon. I just think it's great. It's a complicated area with a lot of routes, and he makes it so easy to navigate. It has the key first pitch photos. Everything's just so cleanly laid out and so much information packed into a book. I think if I could think of my favorite guidebook out there, it's probably the Squamish Select. Also, just a very good climbing area, so it helps. That's a hard question.
It's not something you think of every day.
Yeah.
What's your favorite? I get excited when I read like a fiction book and I see a chapter about climbing, and I'm like, oh, how did this
Well, then
make it into this book?
I include.
Like I'll read a fantasy series and like all of a sudden they'll be talking about climbing. I'm like, how? This is
Okay, I think I
but
got my answer. I think the white spider. I mean, I think it's the one for the Eiger. I think that's what it's called, the white spider. I just remember being just enamored by this idea of going up the north face of the Eiger and all the tragedy and the epics and the ruggedness and how tough these guys were. And then the Eiger Sanction movie that came along with Clint Eastwood, not directly the white spider, but kind of spiraled off that idea. So yeah, there's something.
I have to read this book.
I hope to climb the Eiger someday. That's how my life.
Yeah.
Any route, I want to climb the Eiger.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Steph. Do you have any plugs that you want to give that we haven't touched on yet before we end the show?
I mean, my website, but you've touched on it. If you want to see what I've done and what I will be continued to do it, and if you're interested in climbing, it's all there. My contact info, all the trip reports, all the adventures, all the beta. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Steph, and have a safe travel back to the US.
Oh, thank you.